What is going on, everyone? Welcome into the 415ers podcast. Evan Giddings and Marc Randy with you, as always, 3 times a week on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network with 95.7 The Game. It's a primetime spot again for the 49ers this week, taking a look at the Arizona Cardinals, who both teams are traveling down to play each other in Mexico City. The Niners in Colorado Springs this week, getting acclimated to the elevation. But, Marc, the Niners are coming off a less than impressive win, I would say, on their last primetime trip against the Chargers over the weekend. They get another spot on national TV, but this time it's on Monday night. So kind of an intriguing matchup between two teams going in different directions, but the Cardinals do have the looming sort of air over them of they have been able to fare pretty well against Kyle Shanahan teams in the past.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they won both games against the 49ers last year. If you remember, it was week 5 in Arizona. That was the game that Trey Lance had to start. Niners only put up 10 points of offense. The Cardinals managed to win that game 17-10. And that at the time was a relatively impressive result for the 49ers, despite the fact that it was really frustrating because Arizona was the hottest team in the league to start the year last year. They were undefeated at that point. And then you fast forward a month later, week 9 last year in 2021, the Niners get Arizona at home. Kyler Murray misses that game, and Niner fans are thinking, all right, is a chance to get a win. We'll get back to 500 at 4-4, and things will start looking up. But Colt McCoy and the Arizona Cardinals just absolutely dominated, winning that game 31-17. That put the 49ers at 3-5. And then that week 10 game was the Monday night against the Rams that kind of turned the season around. So Arizona has had success against the 49ers for sure. This one, though, feels a little bit different. There are some injury questions that we'll get into. Kyler Murray and Colt McCoy both were limited in practice on Thursday for the Arizona Cardinals. Colt McCoy dealing with a minor knee issue and Kyler Murray a hamstring issue. That hamstring injury kept Murray out of the game last week for Arizona against the Rams. That's really just the beginning of the injury issues. They also have a lot of banged up offensive linemen. Their defensive secondary, there's a lot of questions around those guys as well. The injury questions don't, only include the Cardinals. The Niners have them as well. We'll see how many of their defensive linemen that they have. I mean, it doesn't look like Armstead is going to play once again. Javon Kinlaw didn't even travel with the team to Colorado Springs because they're still worried about swelling if he hops on an airplane. So he's clearly not going to play. We don't really know about Samson Ebukam at this point either. Nick Bosa didn't practice on Thursday in Colorado Springs, but that's just a day off thing. Because of all those injuries, he played a lot more snaps on Sunday night against the Chargers. So no worry there. But there are still injury concerns all over the place for both these teams. The good news for the 49ers and maybe the bad news for the Cardinals, it doesn't include the team's starting quarterback. I mean, I guess technically it does for the 49ers with Trey Lance, but Jimmy Garoppolo is totally good and ready to go. But I think, once the game gets ready, we hear from the team on Saturday and Sunday and even into Monday morning, we'll have a much better idea to how this game might play out because these injuries can kind of push the game in one direction or the other based on how they play out.
Yeah, and that's probably a reason why the 49ers are such heavy favorites, even in a neutral site game. They typically say home field advantage is worth about 3 points. That doesn't apply here, but the 49ers are still an 8-point favorite down in Mexico City against the Cardinals. 43.5 is the total. Now, I understand that, look, the Niners are a team that right now I think is still trying to find its offensive identity. They have it on defense. I mean, pitching 2 second half shutouts in back-to-back games would tell you that even without a full complement of defensive pieces, still not having Armstead, still not having Kimlaw, they are still, I mean, they lost Jason Verrett midweek last week before the Chargers game. They still are a bit banged up on defense, but offensively, I don't know about you, Marc, but I throughout the week we talked about being a little bit disappointed in what happened offensively against Los Angeles. I do think that this is a chance for the Niners, especially through the air, to potentially take advantage of a Cardinals team that has been pretty middling. It has been honestly inferior as far as their pass defense is concerned. And this is a team that, you know, is only scoring about 23 points per game. They allow 372 yards, 269 or 261.9 of them coming through the air. I think this could be a game where we see the offense that maybe a lot of fans wanted to see against the Chargers, not Jimmy G throwing the ball, 25 yards downfield, but a lot of yards after catch for guys like Kittle, guys like Debo, a couple of players that weren't as much involved in the Chargers game. I could see them getting a lot more touches against a team like Arizona.
Yeah, you mentioned the pass defense for the Cardinals. On the year, they give up about 247 yards per game through the air. That's 23rd in the NFL. For comparison, the Niners are sub 200 per game. That's eighth best in the NFL. So the Niners certainly have the advantage there in the pass game on the defensive side of the ball. And specifically, the Cardinals are the worst team in the NFL at defending against opposing tight ends. The worst team in the NFL. So I'll call it now. I think this is a George Kittle breakout game. He's going to get over 100 yards receiving, and he's going to get into the end zone. I think this is the game of the year for George Kittle. He tends to play well in big moments. This is a Monday night game in Mexico City. He's going to be fired up for this one. And when you consider the fact that the Arizona Cardinals struggle against all receivers, but specifically against tight ends, I think this is a place for George Kittle to shine. He's been, the last few games haven't been great for him. Just one catch for 21 yards against the Chargers, three catches for 39 yards against the Rams. One of those catches were a touchdown that kind of iced that game away late. Before that, though, he did have 98 receiving yards against the Chiefs and 83 against the Falcons. So certainly better numbers there, but those were certainly heavier passing days for the 49ers in the last two. But I think we'll see George Kittle get his in this one. And at least for a week, we can put to bed all of the, talk from 49er fans about get George Kittle the ball more. He needs more touches. I do not think that'll be a problem here on Monday night.
No, I don't think it should either. The one thing that Arizona is a bit surprising. I know that they're kind of two different teams under the different quarterbacks. Colt McCoy took advantage of just a beaten up Los Angeles Rams team last week. I think he was like a 70% completion, 250 with a touchdown. They ended up taking advantage of the Rams. But this is also a Cardinals team that I think two of those three wins before last week were come from behind wins. So I could see some Cardinals fans feeling optimistic that like the Niners are probably going to be playing from ahead in this game, unless Colt McCoy has a resurgence, kind of like he did last week at home. I don't know if you were at that game, Mark, but I was appalled at how well Colt McCoy looked against the Niners. Completely different team, and the Cardinals have, I think, sort of carried over the tail end of last year into this season. Even though you go out and give your quarterback $250 million, there's all the rumors about him before the season, his commitment, his level of work ethic, and with a hamstring injury out last week, not sure what we're going to see. Cliff Kingsbury definitely on the hot seat with the way that this season is going for Arizona. But Colt McCoy is, I mean, it. I don't mean to hype him up, but he is a wild card in this game just because of what he's done before to this team, as well as, I mean, how he looked last week against, albeit a Rams team. This is a Cardinals team with a bit of a flair for the dramatic. That's really the only area I see them having somewhat of a reason to feel hopeful, is the fact that they have come from behind earlier in games this season against the the Las Vegas Raiders, the Carolina Panthers, two not so great opponents. But they do have a little bit of comeback kid in them.
Yeah, the question is going to be who starts at quarterback. Colt McCoy, he was limited at practice with a knee again on Thursday, and then Kyler Murray with the hamstring that kept him out of that game against the Rams with that hamstring. He also was limited. We talked to Tyler Vasquez, who covers the Cardinals for another Odyssey podcast, and he seems to think that Colt McCoy is likely going to play because he thinks that hamstring is going to keep Kyler Murray out. And he also said something interesting, saying that he thinks Colt McCoy might give the Cardinals a better chance to beat the 49ers in this game because with Colt McCoy, you're more kind of forced into being balanced. Maybe it means a bigger day for James Conner. Now the 49ers haven't been phenomenal against the pass so far this year. Certainly haven't been terrible. We mentioned it, they're top 10. But against the run, they're phenomenal. The best in the NFL. So I mean, maybe the Cardinals being forced into using their running game a bit more actually helps out the 49ers. I'm not quite sure. I think with all these injuries up front, that number probably isn't, nearly indicative of what they're capable of this week. But interestingly enough, there is a segment of the Cardinals, fans and media that think right now Colt McCoy might give the team a better chance to win. And you mentioned his last game out. He was pretty good. I mean, 26 of 37, 238, a touchdown, and did not turn the ball over. James Conner did have a couple of touchdowns on the ground, but wasn't really running with too much efficiency in that one. 21 carries and under 70 yards in that game, just over 3 yards per pop. Not terrible, but certainly not something that gives you a ton of confidence when you're heading into a matchup against the Niners defense. But that quarterback, injury there between McCoy and Murray is an interesting one because, as you mentioned, you could kind of make a case that, given the history, Colt McCoy stepping into Levi's last year and absolutely dominating. He's feeling good coming off of a win against the Rams. Of course, there is a question about his knee injury as well, though it does not appear serious at all. That's kind of an interesting one. And I don't want to compare it necessarily to Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, but you kind of get the sense that Colt McCoy is a very, very good and serviceable backup quarterback. I don't think he's on the Jimmy Garoppolo level, and it's not to the point where, Arizona's Super Bowl odds would take a giant jump when their starter gets hurt and goes down for the year like it did with the 49ers and Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. But there is kind of a notion of, all right, starting quarterback is out for a game or two. Not that big of a deal because Colt McCoy has proven maybe not a very good full-time starter, but definitely a serviceable backup quarterback.
Well, that kind of takes me to, I guess, a fictional place, Mark. But you just kind of spurred my mind as you tend to do throughout our podcast. I appreciate you for that.
I try my best.
So if Cardinals fans or media members feel that Colt McCoy might give the Arizona Cardinals a better chance to beat the Niners. Now, I'm sure part of that is because Kyler, if he did play, would not be 100% and might not be able to fully unlock that dual threat ability that makes him such a dynamic quarterback. But right now, with the way that Jimmy Garoppolo is playing, and right now with the way that Kyler Murray is playing, if you had to have one quarterback
Uh-oh.
right now, who would you take? Not
Hmm.
not not long term. I know Kyler Murray is clearly the selection in that case, although for some he might not be. I don't know. But if you had to pick one, if you wanted one on Sunday, which quarterback would you rather have? Or on Monday, I should say.
Is this scenario assuming that Kyler Murray's beef with whoever is his head coach is sticking with him for that Monday?
Um, I'm sure. No, I mean, I guess I'm curious how that changes the equation.
I don't know. I mean, if I was choosing a quarterback to lead my team, I would want to know how he feels mentally. But if we're talking about just the play on the field for one game, ugh, I almost hate myself for saying this, but I think I would choose
Yep.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. It's just
No, I would too.
it's a good question, and I think it speaks to the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo is playing turnover-free football. I almost said mistake-free. He's certainly still making mistakes, but right now it's not turning the ball over. He's avoiding those interceptions when he's getting sacked, even though there are times, and he said that he should throw the ball away. He's not fumbling the ball. Obviously, knock on wood that doesn't turn on Monday night. But he's playing mistake-free football. You can't quite say the same for Kyler Murray. He's turning the ball over with some regularity at this point of the season. Of course, he's been banged up and hasn't played last game and maybe misses this game. But it's an interesting question because I think if you asked it at the beginning of the year, certainly last year, maybe even the year before, you would have gotten an easy answer the other way.